Hi everyone. Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. I hope you've all enjoyed the pre-networking and you're relaxing with a drink or even just a cup of tea if you happen to be presenting, or depending on what time it is where you are. So really looking forward to our first panel today, joined by Philip from Solidatus, Enzo from Suade Labs, and Julien from Flinks. And one of my favorite things I think about the fintech community we have here in the UK, but also across the world, is the openness and honestness when it comes to things going wrong. And that's exactly what the panel is going to talk about today, some of our most common data mistakes and how we can fix them. With kind of an ever increasing number of projects related to data, there are kind of common traps and pitfalls it's very easy to slide into, as I'm sure the panel have experienced. And during this talk, we're going to talk about some of the most popular ones and kind of lessons that people have learned along the way and what we wish that banks and fintechs knew about data. And also please do be sure, I will be asking the questions, but if you have any, you can mention them in the chat function and we'll make sure we get through some of those as well. So first of all, I'd just like to ask the panel to introduce themselves, and we'll start with you, Julien, because you're at the top.
Hi, so Julien from Flinks. Flinks is the leading data aggregator in Canada, and we're also entering in the US right now for data aggregation for finance data. So we do everything from extracting data, enriching, putting intelligence on it. We cover almost more than 300 financial apps in Canada and the US. So yeah.
Great, and we'll move on to Philip.
Hi, thanks very much, Olivia, and thanks very much for joining. Philip Dutton, I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Solidatus. We are a metadata management tool focusing on the structure of data, really understanding the metadata about the underlying data that we have. So that the pointer to the underlying record sets and the governance and management of that data in an organization.
Thanks very much, Philip. And Enzo?
Hi, everybody. So my name is Enzo, and I'm working in Suade Labs. So we are a company that works in the regulatory compliance spectrum. So we've built a product that automates everything that is regulation. We are covering Europe, the UK, US, APAC. So our solution is basically all financial institutions to streamline the regulatory process.
Great, thanks so much, Enzo. And we're also joining us at the moment is Eva, who's just here to make sure the event runs smoothly. She's been working super hard over the past few weeks to pull this together for everyone. So she's here to keep an eye on proceedings too. I just want to delve straight into the panel really. And the first question is, we've gone on a lot of journeys over the past few years, especially exacerbated in 2020, where organizations have tried to get more out of data and really bring it to the center of their business, but perhaps they're still not getting the most out of it and we're not reaching that potential. So I want to know kind of why the panel think that is and where we are now. Philip, I'll go to you first on that one.
Okay, sure. So I guess for me, the real challenge with data and is complexity. I think if we look at the way that data and sort of technology has evolved over the last few years, we've had a huge proliferation of data, and that's based off a huge volume of new systems, and all of the fintechs that there are are adding a unique special part of that journey. But it's an ecosystem, and you need to understand that all of the parts need to interconnect to create kind of something really very, very powerful. And so this complexity of increased data and increased systems is being exacerbated by increased regulation, and I'm sure Enzo will talk about kind of the regulation which comes on top. But I think one of the other things which is not often brought up is that we're trying to do things much faster than we used to. We used to be all kind of waterfall, and we were focused on change every 6 months, and we had kind of long change cycles. Now we're doing releases daily, weekly, and so when you mix those three kind of complexities together, you get a real challenge around understanding the data that you're trying to interact with. And I think for me, that's the biggest challenge that we see. It's the complexity. How do you unravel that ball of string of interconnected systems and data points?
Definitely. And Enzo, Philip mentioned mentioned regulation there. Is that something you think is a big challenge for organizations that you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Philip nailed the topic over there. So the data is becoming more complex, and the reality is that so from the regulatory perspective, eventually they're going to get to a point where they're going to want to know the data in real time, right? So the solutions that we have right now in most financial institutions are based on the same silo, the same legacy processes. And let's face it, sometimes it can look very easy because when you're in a silo, your silo is very adapted to whatever you're doing. But with the world moving to be more interconnected, now it makes sense to start talking about standardization, about APIs, about cross collaboration across teams. So you can no longer just be your own financial institution, your own bank with your own data, and thinking that nobody else is going to be, nobody else need to know the way you work.
Just being aware of that need to collaborate, I suppose. Julien, are your thoughts kind of similar along those lines of collaborating and the complex ecosystem we find ourselves in?
Yeah, it's interesting because in Canada we're not that advanced than in the UK, so the regulation are just starting to be created. Flinks have been a big part in the committee that are going to make those kind of regulation happen. We're not sure yet if it's going to be a government entity or a market-driven entity yet. But so far we are using other methods for accessing the data for now, which is Flinks' main challenge that they do day. I think the most challenging thing with the data is really about, at least for our customers, is really about, first, most of the customers needs to aggregate this data for a long time in order to predict something, so most of the fintech that are starting, or even the fintech that have been there for a long time, or even just financial services that have been there for a long time, never have played with financial data. So they don't have access to that massive amount of data that needs to, it depends if what you want to predict. If you want to predict something very easy like A or B, could be fairly easy, or you need like not a lot of amount of data. But if you want to, let's say, give a credit prediction if like the person was going to repay or not his loan or something like that, then you need a very big amount of profile. So I think that's one of the biggest challenge that I see new company or new concept that have, is they really need those kind of like big distribution of the data that they don't. So maybe this something like when you're going to see like a big amount of synthetic data coming to the market, where you can see like more synthetic data that people can play with, that will help a lot the ecosystem, I feel.
Sure. And I now kind of want to go on to the really interesting part around kind of what mistakes you guys have made on your own journeys when it comes to understanding the best way to do things, or we'll be a bit kinder and we'll ask you for any mistakes you've seen if you don't want to necessarily divulge personal things. So Enzo, why don't we start with you? What's kind of one key mistake you've experienced that you've really learned from?
So maybe I will tackle the question more into what I see in a lot of financial institutions. So after the financial crisis, there's new regulation that came into place, and the regulators basically started demanding more information. And in theory, everybody's embracing digital transformation. Everybody's becoming more agile. But the reality is that you still, a lot of banks still trust a lot on Excel sheets, and Excel sheets are fun, but up to a certain limit. And so in my experience, these kind of manual processes, you can call it digital transformation. You can use your Excels, but they're still manual. These are the same system that failed 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And I think there's this kind of legacy mentality, we'll call it, of, being scared of embracing new technologies. So the way is very simple. The way I see it is very simple. Nowadays, you can go to the store and Google will know where you are every second, right? And Google is not a regulator, but they can do it because they have a standard. Why that's not possible to do with it for the financial institutions as well? I think that's the direction we are going, and the reason why we are not there yet is just because we don't have a standard way of communicating data from one point to the other. but it's something that I see more and more, and I guess in these new challenger banks is that they're embracing. They're really, really techy, and they understand very well the problem. They try to tackle it from a different perspective.
Definitely, and it's interesting what you mentioned there about how everyone wants to talk about doing digital transformation, but is it really a transformation if you're just adding a few things on, I suppose, in your own company rather than thinking about the wider space? Philip, what's a big mistake you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, having spent 20 years on the front line within an investment bank, and kind of really the reason that Solidatus exists is because of the experiences that both myself and my co-founder had in these organizations. And I think the data challenge I see is that we're not really engineering data. We've kind of, for the last 30, 40 years, we've been grappling with this new advancing technology stack that we've had, right? It's constantly changing. We're evolving massively quickly compared to all other engineering disciplines. And so we've very much taken almost, and Enzo kind of pointed to it, that end user compute sort of style. This is good enough. We've got Excel. Excel is great. We can do lots of stuff with it. Except it is to a point, and what we need to do is really look at that whole life cycle. We've got legacy, which we've got to come through and get past, but we've got to look at how do we make this a process and a pattern and a standard. And I think if you look at other engineering disciplines, they've been there, they've done this. They've had a lot longer than we had. We've been asked to sort of progress in the last 40 years, the same as probably a few 100 years for other disciplines. But you have a standard for steel, you have a standard for strength of glass and for types of concrete. So when you're building a building, it's really quite a structured process. In software, because of the intangible nature of it, we can build anything that we want, and we do. And I think the real mistakes is we don't think about what's the next thing that's coming and how is this going to fit into an organization that is going to be iteratively changing very, very rapidly. And I think one of the real mistakes is not understanding that context of data, just thinking in a siloed mentality of this fits into my solution for now, not how does it affect everybody around me, and how is it going to affect us in a week, in a month, in a year, in 2 years, and not having that kind of that horizon view of where do we need to get to, because this is just another evolution, right? We will get better and better and better and better, and we have massively over the last 20, 30 years. If you think, okay, we used to be on mainframes, and we had we've now got more RAM and memory in our phones than the supercomputers of even 10 years ago. That's going to continue to progress forward, and so the mistake is really understand that we're on an evolution, and we should be thinking much more about the future, about setting those standards to make interoperability really easy.
I think you're totally right, because I think especially after the year that we've just had, all kinds of organizations will be looking at how do they future-proof and predict the future, or try to, and the resilience that comes with that, because they will have had a shock over the past year in that way. Julien, do you agree with that? And what's the kind of biggest mistake that you've seen?
Yeah, I guess like the one of the thing I see right now in mistake I'm currently seeing is people that are fighting between regulation and standardization, and other people that are just following the wave, going really just to traction. I think Flinks is really more about this really whatever the regulation, whatever the way we go and extract the data, we're just gonna provide if a market traction is there, a consumer wants this or that services, then we're gonna find a way to make it happen. And you have the other side, people don't understand at all the use cases, trying to figure out ways to do everything more in a resilient way, secure way, and stuff and now we see this kind of intersection between the market needs and also the regulation and how we can do the same thing that the market needs, but in even like Philip say, improving over that. But you have always these two people trying to tell each other what's the best way to do stuff. I guess and I think that's one big risk of an error. want people have too much voice and like kind of let the other people aside. So sometimes I saw some like very nice, API made, but nobody used it. So at the end of the day, what's the biggest risk of a good, super strong, secure API? It's someone that nobody used that secure way because it's just not usable and people just don't solve the problems it needs to do. So I think it's very important that the people that understand the use cases, how the consumer use the data, can guide the people that build maybe more resilient way to access the data. And a funny error I did, not related to this, is we try to like we're really related to the data and trying to predict data. We try to go too big on a prediction of credit loan repayment, and something I've learned and that I'm trying to make also all the companies that are in that space to learn is that you really need to understand how much amount of data you need for the prediction you want to build. So sometimes you really need to not skip the phase of like feasibility of the prediction of the model you want to build, and because you need a lot of training, like to build a model. And sometimes you think you have the necessary label or feature to do that model and for the prediction you desire and you want to sell and stuff like that. And sometimes 6 months later, a couple of $1,000s later, you just notice that, oh, I don't have enough data, I don't have enough feature to the prediction. So yeah, that's kind of be a big mistake when you arrive like 6 months later and you're not able to push in production. That's the kind of stuff that is like not very nice with AI and data. Is like when you code a software, normally it's predictable that you want to do a timesheet. Like, okay, if I work 3 months, then I'm gonna have the timesheet software. With AI and data, is like you don't really know if your model will be accurate enough to make it into production. You just have like good bet, but it's very difficult. Or at least if people are able to do that, they're very, very good. Yeah, that's the main error that I didn't pass.
Great. Yeah, no, it's interesting getting that balance as well between having the right amount and not, I suppose, taking unnecessary data, which is what a lot of people are concerned about now as well. Another thing I'd like to ask you all is, you've all mentioned kind of the financial institutions and even the fintechs that you try and support and help them on their data journey. If you could each pick one thing that you wish an incumbent bank, for example, knew about data or really understood about data, what would you tell them? Enzo, we'll come back to you for the first point.
I would say, don't think that you are unique. Everybody alone is the same loan here in the UK, in the US, or in Peru, where I'm from. There's no reason why banks need to be duplicating efforts. The reality is that a lot of the processes, and especially on the regulatory side, what we are working on, can be, and we are actually automating them. And when you actually, embrace this transformation, really move away from, the normal manual consultancies, Excel sheets, etc., you realize that actually regulation stops being a cost for your balance sheet. So let's face it, the bank is not on the market of making the cleanest regulatory reports, right? They do reports because the regulators ask them to do it. But if you see from another perspective, and you actually clean your data, you send the data to the regulators, why not think of that data as something that is now adding to your own balance sheet? You can extract it, you can do whatever you want with it, you can create a dashboard, you can make decisions, you can analyze your customers, you can analyze your products. I think that's the power that you can get from doing these investments in real digital solutions.
Definitely. And Philip, what are your thoughts on something you wish you could tell all banks about data?
How long do we have? No, I think Enzo kind of raises a really good point there, and I think what we're trying to do is, certainly, as part of Solidatus, is to help the banks understand their data. I think it really is key. If you want to, and Julien touched on it as well, if you want to be able to drive a model or to do regulation well, you have to understand your data. It's fundamental, and it's not just kind of knowing that we have this record set here or that record set there. It is really about understanding all of the data and how it interconnects with each other, because it's that connectedness that really gives the complexity to what they are. Like, investment banks, as Enzo said, a loan is a loan. But when you've got 10 systems that loan flows through before it gets to your regulatory report, that's where you have your challenge. And so by understanding your data, and understanding that you want to have it as a reusable asset, so that the same way that you understand your data for a regulatory purpose should drive your ability to get market insights and customer insights, and really to focus on your customer. So you want to reuse the cost from regulation to drive your organization forward. So money spent on kind of internally understanding how data flows between systems, what data sets you have, for what purpose they can be used for, by who, is the backbone to really reducing organizational and regulatory costs down to a very, very low number, and getting the value of all those kind of business insights that you can get. It's like a foundation of a house. Without it, you may as well not build the house. And so the questioning of, like, why do we do data management? Why do I need to understand my data and how it flows? It's the same reason the regulator is asking you to do it, because it shows that you understand and you have control over process, and you can therefore report correctly. But equally, you can your customers can have trust in the data that you're providing them. It's I saw a recent statistic that data leaders, 91% of them didn't have a very high level of trust in their data. Now, if that was a consumer saying, I don't have a very high trust in the balance that is being provided to me on my bank statement, the world would be in chaos. But that's what these data leaders are facing on a daily basis. They can't trust their data because they don't understand the data sets and the complexity. And I think that's where we need to get to, is to really understand the data that we're dealing with. Once we understand it, then we can control it, and then we can gain value from it.
Definitely. And Julien, what's one thing you wish you could?
Yeah, I think Philip nailed it really, really well. I think to add on this is to discuss a lot with large financial institution, a lot of time trying to make them tap into that ecosystem of financial application, and a lot of banks in Canada are just trying to get an idea around, okay, how we can position it around this open banking thing. It's a beast that they some people think they understand, they don't. You have so many type of people that really understand, people think they understand, they don't, and everything. So what I will wish is really a common understanding, and I think it's just time that can do this. A common understanding of what is the use cases. I see people at the bank level say, okay, let's work with Flinks, let's connect with all these cool apps that are there and we are hearing everywhere. But then after that, okay, but do you know what that app does? And when your clients is using it? And at that point, everyone is really confused a little bit. Okay, so this app is when your people want to save money when traveling or something like that. Do you know when they install these apps? No, not really. So it's very difficult to get them win into that change, this transition from a bank get the person from his birth to his death and service him for every financial needs they want the whole life, to okay, maybe I have a couple of stuff that I just don't know, just sharing the bill when we go traveling or the restaurant, and and you want to have this kind of interconnection with so many use cases, just loan. We have a customer that loan money for some sort of religion, because they need some sort of loan just for a particular religion. so many use cases, and it's very difficult to get this discussion and trying to make them participate in that ecosystem when they really have no clue of like when their customers, because they build this kind of generic experience for all their customers, and then it fits model for like most of the financial needs they have, but for all the very specific experience that the customer needs, that's where we really need more education at the bank's level for that.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. And I think that comes down to what others have said as well around a use case and thinking about that, because a lot of organizations are really excited to chase a new technology. And even in the UK, we're kind of really doing interesting things with open banking, but we're still talking about it. And people say, yeah, open banking is great. And they don't want any follow-up questions on why or what they plan to do with it. So I think that's very true. I think we just have like one or 2 minutes left before our fireside chat. And I just wanted there's a question coming from the audience here from Jamie, who says, if you're using analytics to monitor your financial data, how do you use it to understand current and past performance, as well as predicting future performance to help make smarter business decisions? Does anyone have a comment to make on that? Just put it out to everyone.
I mean, I would have thought Julien would want to jump in on this one, but I'm happy to always throw my 2 cents into the ring. I mean, I think, you know, the data that we're able to capture, provided you've got, you know, sufficient data, you're able to sort of to run some analytics and some, you know, predictive AIs or machine learnings again to try and find how the data sets work together to give you a desired result. I think, you know, the introduction of kind of the time element makes things kind of really interesting, because when you're looking at then multiplying the data set volume that you have by time, it's like, well, something that someone was doing a year ago might not be something that they're doing now, and that makes the predictive nature really difficult, because as kind of Julien says, you're going through kind of a life journey, and so you've got to understand how the person is evolving, and so it becomes, you know, more and more difficult, and so you need to get really accurate and quality data in order to do really good analytics. That's the key. You know, you can't just throw some data together and hope to get some insights. It doesn't really work that way. You need to have accurate, clean data in order to do real kind of advanced AI or machine learning analytics, as Julien said, right? It's a difficult thing to train a model well to get the kind of the desired results from it, and because it's not A equals B or A plus B equals C, you know, you have to have really good quality data to do those analytics.
And maybe just to add on that is like, the answer to the question is yes and no, because, you know, yes, you always want to have more data to predict smarter business decision, but I would say no, because in a way that the question is too broad. Is like what kind of smart business decision you want to predict, and depends of like what you want to predict. I would say yes, we can use financial data, or no. So I would say like, it's true if like this statement will fail in a way that this is too broad, so you never know like what kind of thing you want to predict, but it also can succeed if you really have the right data for the right prediction you want to do. But you need like maybe a prediction like, okay, what kind of, can you predict like a healthy cash flow in 6 months? This is like, you can start from that statement and then knowing if you have the financial data needed to do that.
Yeah, so it's starting with that specific question and that specific endpoint in mind before you start. That's great. Thank you both for that, and thanks everyone for listening. We're coming to the end of the first panel now, and we're going to move on to a fireside chat with Michael from Future Processing, who you've already met, and Simon from Spendesk. So I just ask you all to click on the below video if you scroll down to access the fireside chat, or you can see the agenda, which is on the right-hand side of the screen. You should be able to click through there. And I look forward to joining you all back here afterwards.